Welcome to the 49th in a series of shows focused on Brookline as an age-friendly community. In 2012, Brookline was the first community in New England to be designated an age-friendly city by the World Health Organization. Last year, AARP also designated Brookline as one of its age-friendly cities. This was a result of the work by the town residents, by the select board, town departments, and leadership provided by Brookline Can, a volunteer organization that works on issues for residents of all ages. Viewers are welcome to join Brookline Can, which is a network of people, ideas, and actions. Just go to the Brookline Can website, brooklinecan.org. Our guest today is Sarah Kaplan. Sarah is the ADA coordinator and a community relations specialist. Sarah works with all the town departments to address and ensure that all residents and visitors have equitable access to town services, programs, and events. She serves as a resource for residents in various ways that they have needs, and she also serves on commissions and committees as a staff liaison. Currently, she's on the working with the Brookline Commission on Disability and also the Police Commissioner's Advisory Committee. Sarah has 2 master's degrees, one in ethics and political theory, the second in school counseling with grades 5 through 12. Before 2018, she worked for over a decade with several direct service nonprofits, including running an internship program for young adults with disabilities for 6 years. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you for having me.
Very good to have you on our show. Sarah, for me, can we start out with what is a disability?
Sure. So I'm going to talk to you about what a disability is under the ADA, or the Americans with Disabilities Act, because I'm not a doctor and I don't get to decide whether or not you specifically have a disability. But according to the ADA, a person with a disability is someone who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activity. Or if you have a history or record of such an impairment, like cancer that's in remission, or you're perceived by others as having an impairment, such as a person who has scars on their face from a severe burn. If a person falls within any of these categories, the ADA protects them. The ADA is a law and is not a benefit program, so you don't need to apply for coverage.
And just so, because our program is geared towards older adults, how particularly does disability come to play with older adults?
So there's a advocate that has a saying that I really like, which is the difference between you and me is luck and time. So I have a disability. I was born with a disability. That's my luck. But over time, the longer you live, the more likely you are to acquire a disability. And so many older adults do acquire a disability over time. They might, for example, have hearing issues or vision issues or mobility issues, or they might have developed diabetes or cancer or some sort of mental health issue. All of those things fall under the ADA.
Yeah, most of them show up gradually as you get old enough.
Yes, for sure.
I would say. Okay. The other thing was, and this came up in our committee, physical versus mental impairment. Is there a mental disability, or is that considered?
So, I mean, mental disabilities can be seen in many different ways. There might be a developmental disability, like cerebral palsy, which I have, is considered a developmental disability. It's something that happened in my brain that affected the rest of my body. Or you may have a cognitive issue. You may be
I know people.
Developmentally delayed, or you may have a speech impairment. or you may have a mental health disability related to things like depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar disorder. All of those things could be considered some sort of mental impairment. Physical impairment is typically something as seen as it manifests in your body. So like you may have spasticity, or you may have issues walking, or issues with your fine motor skills. All those things are physical impairments. And so how a physical impairment or a mental impairment is defined is typically defined in a medical sense. And that's really not something that I'm comfortable talking about. I'm not a doctor, but in terms of whether or not you are covered under the ADA, if you tell me you have a disability, I don't really go after you and go like, can you give me more information on that? I'm gonna just
Accept that.
accept it and move on, because the next question is not tell me about your disability. The next question is tell me how your disability affects your life, especially as how it affects your life when you want to engage in Brookline civic engagement, if you want to be part of community events. How does this disability impact your life, and how can we make sure that you have equal access to everything the town provides?
Great. Well, you started getting into it, but I'll ask a little more. The ADA role, the coordinator role, what do you what is your job?
So I am the Title II and Title III coordinator. Title I is employment. That's not me. Title II specifically focuses on state and local governments. So it talks about what the state and local governments are required to provide for people with disabilities, like physical access to their offices, for example, physical access to community events. And then also we're talking about communication access. So are you providing ASL interpreters upon request? Are you providing information about your programs that is readable and understandable? Can you provide it in large print? Can you provide it in a screen reader accessible document? Can you provide it in other formats upon like Braille?
Oh, sure, the
Requested.
elevators, etc.
And then specifically, I believe Title III, although it's not, is specific about more information about what's called effective communication, which goes into more detail about things like how you create effective, how you communicate about the programs that you provide. And then specifically, we also talk about programmatic access. So
Right.
when you're building a new program in town, are you thinking about access from the beginning?
So do they ask you for advice? I understand the person comes to you and says, gee, I can never get to this meeting because there's a problem. The elevator doesn't have Braille. It probably does, but there's an issue that really causes me a problem. And I understand that you would help them. Now, what about the government? Do they come to you also?
So my job primarily is to work with the town. I work with every single department, and I talk to them all about the programs that they provide, because I don't have encyclopedic knowledge about what every department does.
Sure.
But I will say to them, like, what are some things that you are currently working on, specifically that I call front facing or resident facing programs? How are you thinking about people with disabilities when you're building these programs, when you're building the processes of these programs? Like, what is the eligibility criteria? Could that eligibility criteria actually make this program less accessible? How can we make it more accessible? And so we talk about all sorts of things. A great example is I am currently working on a very big project. It's called the Self-Evaluation Transition Plan, where we are doing I am currently in the process of meeting with every single department head to talk to them about what each of their departments is doing and how we can make sure that the programs and services their office provides are accessible to as many people as possible. the very first meeting I had was with the fire chief. And obviously, the fire chief in the fire department fights fires. And I understand that. That makes a lot of sense. But I said, Chief, what else do you do?
They do a lot
I
more.
don't know. And and he said, well, I'm very interested, and my department is very interested in fire prevention. I said, that's really interesting. Can you tell me what you mean? And he explained it to me. And I said to him, so you do these kind of talks with groups of people in person, yes? And he said, yes. And I said, have you ever considered putting them on video? He said, why?
Right.
And I said, well, if you put them on video, we can caption them. If we caption them, they're more accessible to more people.
Right.
And then you can also put them online and everyone can access them at their own leisure, which then means you can build more curriculum. You don't have to be repeating the same, one or two topics over and over again. You can actually expand because now you have like an archive that's online and is more accessible to more people.
Right.
And when I mentioned that to him, he had never thought about that before. And he got really excited. So that is now like something we are going to work on in the next 3 to 5 years as we work through the transition plan once it's published.
Great. We did something like that with MABV from the where they put together a video for just that purpose, that kind of purpose.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Is the community just passed through it? So I know I mentioned it. Community relations specialist role that's not related to the ADA, but what is that?
So how I like to describe community, like a good portion of my job is taking complaints. So I am often people's first point of contact, whether
Right.
they're contacting the town because they have a accessibility issue or they're contacting the town because they have another issue. My title of community relations specialist is there so that everyone knows they can reach out to me and say, I have a problem with this process. Can you help me through it? I will then work with the department to figure out where the disconnect was and address it.
Got it. And you do that all the time.
I do that all the time.
Yes, I'm aware of that. Got it. By the way, quick question. The T and MBTA, are they on there? Do you work? Are they considered business or government?
Is a state agency.
Right.
Like I will work with the T along with DPW to address issues. I don't work for the T, I work for the town. So
Sure.
I'm always coming to any sort of issue from the town perspective. I don't go to the T and like tell them what Brookline needs, but if I get concerns or complaints related to the MBTA, I do have semi-regular contact with them, and I'm in touch with their system-wide accessibility office.
Oh, good. So I think you mentioned it, but the nonprofits, are they included in your same, right?
So not businesses and nonprofits and how the ADA applies to them is not my area of expertise, although I've done some research. And I want to lay that out from the beginning. Okay. I don't want to claim that I'm the best person to answer this question, but here's what I can tell you. Businesses and nonprofits, if they receive federal funding, are supposed to be accessible. If they do not receive federal funding, for example, if a nonprofit is part of a religious organization, they do not need to be accessible. There's a loophole in the ADA that allows religious spaces to not be accessible.
Okay, that's really interesting, actually. That's really interesting.
It's a political thing, and it's not really something I want to get into, but it is the case, and it is.
I've seen somewhere they put in elevators into religious religious synagogue.
And like they can decide that accessibility is important to them, but they're not required by law to be accessible.
Right. So compliance.
Mm-hmm.
You're not a cop. You don't walk down with,
No.
So useful if you were, but yes.
I want to be clear, the ADA is not a proactive law, it's a reactive law. So when I need a complaint to act on, I don't go, except for when I'm doing something like the transition plan, I don't go around looking for problems in town. I have other things I need to be doing. And so if I get a complaint and it says like, this push button door is not working, I will then figure out, typically it's building. And I would reach out to building and I would say, hey, this is the address. This push button door is not working. How soon can we get it addressed? And I would talk to someone in building and they would give me a timeline. And then I tend to go back to the resident who made the complaint and try to give them a sense of that timeline. And then I also ask that resident to let me know after that date, if it's not been addressed, please contact me. Because again, I'm not always going to be able to go out and test every door.
Of course. So this way, but you can follow up if
Yeah.
the resident comes to you, you're
Yeah.
able to, and it's someone such as you that's there, works for the town, that's asking them questions
Yes.
and trying to help them.
I mean, residents of the town should know that they can always go to the departments directly. But like, I am here to kind of interface between them and the town for, for everyone's comfort. Because
Right,
you're not as comfortable going to department head and telling them like, this isn't accessible, or you're not sure if this access, like, if something is about accessibility or if it's about something else.
so,
So like building code, for example, allows you not to put like, if a door has less than 5 pounds of pull force, it doesn't need to have a push button. And you may not know that. And so I will sometimes get a call saying, shouldn't there be a push button here? And I'll be
so,
like, I'm happy to go out and look, but I don't actually know the answer to that question.
so that's probably why when the buttons don't work, the doors are extremely heavy because they wouldn't have put the buttons in the first place.
Yeah, the buttons are there because if
Because the door is
5
heavy,
pounds.
right? Okay, I got it. So the push button's not making it heavy or doing something to it.
No, but like
Yeah.
it makes it easier for everyone. And then also there's a difference between compliance and best practice. And I am always trying to push the town beyond compliance towards best practice.
Okay,
Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not. But I really am working to help them understand that accessibility isn't just about people with disabilities, it's about a lot more
right,
people. And like, for example, curb cuts are a great example. Curb cuts are great for people in wheelchairs or people who have mobility devices, that obviously, but they're also really, really helpful for people who are pushing baby strollers or
sure,
for your mail carrier who's got a lot of boxes.
absolutely.
And when you don't have those things, suddenly that sidewalk or that part of town becomes less accessible, not just to me or to people with disabilities, but to everyone. And so we need to be thinking about those sort of things.
Absolutely. Spaces outside.
Mhm.
I understand parks. I understand public spaces.
Yes.
I also access when we talked to you, you mentioned computer access
Yes.
and online access.
Yes.
And that was interesting. And what did you mean by that? What is,
So there are guidelines called the WCAG guidelines, and if you give me a second, I can look up and tell you what they mean.
great,
I didn't have this one in front of me. WCAG compliance is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines.
okay,
They are designed to make sure that websites are accessible to people with disabilities. People who might have issues with websites include people who are blind,
right,
people who have color blindness, and for things that like have audio, people who are deaf,
sure.
hard of hearing.
But the colorblindness, I hadn't thought of, but sure, deaf and, yeah, absolutely.
The funny thing about color blindness is that color blindness is one of the most common disabilities in the world. Let me
So we have a little time. We have some time left. And before you go on, you are on a show that should be accessible. What do you think of it?
We've been talking about this. I really think that the show can be a great model for accessibility. I'm going to encourage you to turn on captioning for uh every show going forward. And I'm
Right,
also going to encourage you to think about the colors that you're using and the accessibility of the fonts that you're using on the screen. I would highly suggest, white text on black. If you are going to use colors that are red, green, blue, which are the most common color blindness colors, or colors that affect people who are colorblind, I would outline your words in black, and so that they are visible against a red, green, or blue background. But like, color blindness affects 1 in 12 men and 1 in 200 women. So like, in town, and at any given meeting with over 12 people, there's likely one person in the room
right,
who isn't seeing every single color. And you would think that, how much can color blindness affect your life? Well, consider how much we use color. Like, stop signs are red. Red green is one of, like, there's red green color blindness and blue green color blindness. And so, and those are the biggest, and then there's total color blindness. But like, the most common are the first two that I mentioned, I believe. Um and we use a lot of signs that are not great for people who need
right.
this information. And it's important that we think about access for as many people as possible, for as much as possible.
Great. I think we'll revisit our show.
Mhm. I appreciate
I'm
that.
not in charge, but we are a team, and we'll revisit it and take a look at it. As far as compliance, is there anybody else involved in Brookline
So I work
with,
with James Pouliot a lot on the town's website,
right?
and I have begun working with Christina. I feel bad, but the new communications person in town.
Oh, yes. Uh,
So, you know, and in general, I'm working with all departments about how they're communicating with town
great.
residents, and I work with Ben Kaufman out of town's clerk's office to make sure that town meeting is accessible.
Absolutely.
And also to all public meetings are accessible. And I so most residents will have seen my name at the bottom of every single agenda, because I'm the contact if you're having access issues in public meetings. But and I work with the liaisons for each of those public meetings to make sure that residents have full access.
Right. So you also mentioned composting it when we talked earlier, and I thought that
So
was something worth. It's
we
very
you
relevant.
asked me about a program that I've helped build in. I
Right,
was, DPW reached out to me. They were building they wanted to build a new compost program,
right,
which I'm really, really excited about for them. And they asked me, how can we make this program more accessible to all residents? And I said to them, well, what happens if you're a person with a disability who wants to compost, but when you walk up to the big compost bin, you don't have hands? How do
and
you, how do you open the compost bin? So we came up with a solution that they're going to run a pilot program so that people with disabilities, older adults are, I believe, yes, I believe older adults are part of this program, are able to apply for like smaller compost bins, and then all they need to do is take it out, like they would take out their garbage and it would get picked up. But it
Yeah.
also, if you wanted to access the larger compost bins, I believe that they're also working on a compost ambassador program, so that there would be somebody near the compost bin who would be able to help you if you needed.
Okay, great.
I'm not, I don't want to speak for someone else's program. This was just a conversation I had with DPW. And
Absolutely.
being
But it's
brought
just
in.
interesting. I just thought it was interesting, the kinds of things that occur, even a new program coming in, like relatively new. It was
Yeah.
there differently. It
And
wasn't,
then,
you
of
know,
course, like one of the programs that residents talk to me most about is the Tech Buddies program, which is run through the senior center.
right,
That's providing people with disabilities and seniors with free tablets if they qualify. And so
right.
I am the intake person for that program.
Okay.
Residents talk to me and I walk them through a series of questions, and then if they qualify, make sure that their information is sent to the program.
Oh,
And
that's great.
in general, my
It's a very successful program.
yeah, it really is. And it's a program that has helped more people with disabilities and more seniors connect to Brookline. And that is really important. And in
Okay.
general, my office lends me out to other departments to make sure that residents can easily reach out and get what they need.
So Sarah, as I said, we could do a number of programs
Yeah,
easily.
for sure.
Okay, so let's look forward to doing this in the future. I don't know
I'd
if
be
you have,
happy to come back and talk more in depth about
absolutely,
specific topics.
yep. And is there any, I mean, want to make sure, is there anything else you wanted to make sure that we hit?
Just that residents should know that they're welcome to reach out to me. My office number is 617-730-2329. Or
Thank
they're welcome to email me at skaplan, that's S like Sam, KAPLAN at brooklinema.gov. I can't spell my own last name.
Perfect, thank you. An excellent, thank you,
So
Sarah.
residents are welcome to reach out to me at any point if they need assistance, and I'm happy to help them.
Well, thanks. And I want to say that, as I said, it's important for you to come on, and we will have you periodically on the
I'm
same.
happy to do so. Thank you, Matt.
And then the program, of course, to everybody else, the program will be rebroadcast several times. And it's available on the Brookline Can website, the one I mentioned before, brooklinecan.org, and on the Brookline Can Facebook and X accounts. It will be distributed. Thanks all for watching. Take care and be safe.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.